Stand up.
And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, is Disneyland's new annual pass program inclusive to disease-carrying rodents?
Fair question.
And could my creepy cousin ever move out of Grandma's basement? And also, send me more of those J-Lo and Ben Affleck pics.
Yes, sir. Can't get enough.
And now, the podcast host who will run past your house multiple times as long as the security cam footage goes viral, Pete Dominic.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Pete Co. By the way, the other day, I'm a big women's soccer fan, and the women lost to Canada in the semifinals? The semifinals. And after the game, one of the stars of the team, Megan Rapinoe, one of the veterans, was giving an interview. And then in the background, in an empty stadium, you saw one of the other stars of the team, Carly Lloyd, running wind sprints. Okay, so they'd played a whole game, and they lost, and then she was running wind sprints, but she was doing it behind where her teammate was being interviewed. You could see her running the wind sprints. It's always irked me when certain players and certain athletes at any level, after they lose the game, they kind of like punish themselves. But I suppose that's a way of dealing with the anxiety, with the sadness, frustration, and disappointment of losing. But I don't know. It seems a little bit on the nose if she's doing it kind of on camera. I probably shouldn't have brought that up, but that's what that made me think of. It's not fair. But I love them, all of them. I think they're great, and I'm rooting for them to win the bronze. Okay, folks. Well, welcome to the show. I've got two amazing guests joining me today. Dr. Ruth Ben Giat, who is a historian, a professor at NYU, the author of Strongmen. She's got her own newsletter now called Lucid. We talked about Tucker Carlson's trip to Hungary to support Viktor Orban and his right-wing authoritarian agenda. It was great. Always learn a lot from her. And Wajahat Ali joins me, one of your all-time favorites. We had a wide-ranging discussion as well that I think you're going to love. Always great. We talked a lot about Andrew Cuomo and boys and raising boys and men and all kinds of stuff. It was great as always. I think you're going to love both of those conversations. I had a pretty long day on Wednesday. I hope you had a good day. I hope you're having a good week. And I had to drop my dog off to my brother's house. He lives about 2.5 hours away, and up in the Catskills. It's beautiful up there. My parents had my daughter. So they drove down, and we met. I gave him the dog. We all hung out. We went for a little walk. We had dinner, and then by the time I got home, it was 10:30, and here I am making the podcast, and then I find out that my other daughter, Ava, 16, just got diagnosed with the Lyme's. She got the tick bite and got Lyme's, which is luckily treatable with antibiotics because we're going away on Saturday, and she feels fine. But anybody who, if you've had that, definitely reach out and let me know, especially if, I guess, young people deal with it better, apparently. But yeah, it just sucks. I mean, it's not a big deal, but pretty stressed out to learn that. But luckily, I got friends like Dr. Aaron Carroll and our Dr. Ken Zatz, who's a listener of the show and supporter of mine, awesome doctor, physician. So she's in great hands. So I talked to both them, and they were super helpful. And all is well. But if you know anything about that, if anybody's gotten the old Limesy, then let me know. It's not going to stop us from going outside and going in the woods and doing everything that we do. And still don't know where she got bit, but yeah, she just tested positive. So nothing's going to slow us down. We're going to take that week off. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got a lot of interviews that I'm going to be dropping next week, scheduled to be dropped, but I'm going to try to get away from the screens and focus on my family and try to relax and recharge and come back here and keep doing what we're doing every day. Can't do it without your support. Thanks for your subscription, your paid subscription. Hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. It is Thursday. It'll be the final Hangout. I'm just going to be off next week, and then we'll be back to hanging out. But I'm just taking a week off, obviously. So maybe I'll have a Hangout with you guys from the resort that we're at, but I don't think so. I really want to just be not near screens. I'm thinking of, by the way, on my vacation, I'm flirting with the idea of just eliminating screens almost entirely the whole time. No, nothing. Just writing and reading, and that's it. And hanging out and eating and drinking, but mostly writing and reading. What do you think of that idea? Has anybody ever done that? I'd really love to get away from the screens and the news and everything that comes along with them for a week. So looking forward to that. But speaking of the news, hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. in the Hangout. The link is in the show notes. As always, if you are a subscriber, you can meet us at the virtual Hangout tonight at 8 East. So let's get to that news I was talking about. Lots to talk about. I don't know how much time I'll have here because, like I said, it's late, but I do want to share some clips with you and some headlines, obviously, in the news dump. It's time for the last 24. All right, folks. So the big story today seems to be the governors. The governors of the 4 largest states in the country are all under fire right now, according to CNN.com. Gavin Newsom facing a recall effort. You got Ron DeSantis facing increased calls for taking action to address the state's surging number of cases and hospitalizations from coronavirus. You, of course, got Andrew Cuomo under pressure to resign his office following the release of an investigation conducted by the state's attorney general. It reported that he had sexually harassed almost a dozen women, created a hostile work environment for women, and he's given no indication that he's going to resign. And the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, like Ron DeSantis, resisting any changes in the state's policies towards COVID-19, even as the Delta variant spreads wildly across Texas. Cases up 200% over the past 14 days, according to New York Times. And the governor there doubled down on his do-nothing strategy. So a few governor clips to play for you, too. Who I didn't mention is the governor of New Jersey. His name is Phil Murphy. He's a Democrat, and he was holding a little press conference outside where there were some anti-vaxxers in the audience, and he's having none of it. Listen to this. Phil Murphy of New Jersey.
Please get vaccinated. Period. These folks back there have lost their mind. You've lost your minds. You are the ultimate knuckleheads, and because of what you are saying and standing for, people are losing their life. People are losing their life, and you have to know that. Look in the mirror.
Whew, Phil Murphy.
Look in the mirror.
Pissed at the anti-vaxxers. I thought that I'm fine with that. No problem. No complaints from me. And now here also is the governor of Arkansas. His name is Asa Hutchinson, where they've had a lot of COVID there, really bad signs there. And he's now admitting regret, saying that he regrets signing a law as the governor of Arkansas, banning the local mask mandate. So they wanted to have make sure that you have to wear a mask, and his state legislature, a lot of businesses, a lot of towns and communities in Arkansas said, we want to pass this mandate to wear a mask in public. And of course, the legislators voted against it. He signed that, and now he's saying he regrets it as COVID cases are quickly rising in the state of Arkansas. Here's Asa Hutchinson.
I signed it for those reasons, that our cases were at a low point. Everything has changed now. And yes, in hindsight, I wish that had not become law. But it is the law, and the only chance we have is either to amend it or for the courts to say that it has an unconstitutional foundation.
All right, that's Governor clip number 2. And now here is the worst of them, though. It's the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He is pissed for getting called out by the White House and the administration, who basically the talking point of the argument that you're hearing from Biden, Jen Psaki, and others is, if you're not going to be a part of the solution, get out of the way and let the federal government do it. Well, Ron DeSantis didn't like that, didn't like being told what to do.
So his vision is, just like in New York City, restaurants should ban young kids from being able to go in because they're not eligible for vaccination, and law-abiding citizens have to produce proof of their medical records just to go to the gym or attend an event or just to participate in everyday society. He wants that, but yet if you want to vote, he thinks it's too much of a burden to show a picture ID when you're voting. So no voter ID, but have to show your medical papers just to be able to live in everyday life? Give me a break. And so I think.
Okay, you don't have to show your medical papers. You just have to show a card, just a card that says you are vaccinated. And that is so as to protect other people, because there is a huge problem, a pandemic, that needs to be solved. And this, unfortunately, is one of the best public policies and methods to solve it, to confirm that people are vaccinated. Having to have an ID to vote is a completely different thing. It's infuriating that he brings that up. He knows better. He just thinks it sounds good. So first of all, he says medical records. That's not what's being asked. Second of all, he brings up the voter ID issue. There's not an issue. See, that's the thing. We have a pandemic of COVID. We don't have a pandemic of people misrepresenting themselves on election day at the polls. We don't have any problem with that, as a matter of fact, at all. It's such a cheap, stupid hack argument, and DeSantis knows exactly what he's doing. Here's more.
I think the question is we can either have a free society or we can have a biomedical security state. And I can tell you, Florida, we're a free state.
Yeah, which is why you have a huge amount of COVID. The type of rhetoric, biomedical. No, we just want this pandemic to end. And that means you get vaccinated, and that way people won't get sick.
People are going to be free to choose to make their own decisions about themselves, about their families, about their kids' education, and about putting food on the table.
Well, I'm scheduled to talk to Andrew Spar. Speaking of Florida education, he is the president of the biggest teachers union in the state. Very influential, well-connected guy, a very good friend of mine. He's scheduled to be on tomorrow, but more back to this jackass.
And Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way.
He's not saying that you have to do lockdown policies. Again, that's not an argument that Joe Biden is making.
Let me tell you this. If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida.
Okay, here we go with the tough guy talk. He's about to say how tough he is. If you're coming after the rights of the parents, and just, oh my God, you're infringing upon the rights.
I'm standing in your way.
Nobody cares. You're such a jackass.
I'm not going to let you get away with it.
You have to let them get away with it. It's the federal government. You're going to lose. Look, he's looking at his speech, his notes. What's next? What am I going to say next?
If you're trying to deny kids a proper in-person education.
Okay, now there's more tough guy talk. Oh, great.
I'm going to stand in your way. And
I hope somebody runs over you, metaphorically, just like Bull Connor.
I'm going to stand up for the kids in Florida. If you're trying to restrict people.
You're not standing up for the kids. Oh, my God, this guy sucks.
People impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way.
He's so tough. He's going to stand in everybody's way, and none of these things are even being what's suggested. We want cruise ships to be able to mandate vaccines. You're standing in the way of that.
And I'm standing for the people of Florida. So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
Oh, man. Yeah. He went to the border. Yep. And then everybody freaked out, and they were so happy for him. This guy is the really, really terrible person. And let's do one more governor. He is a Democrat from Louisiana, and he yesterday talked about vaccine and mask hesitancy in the state of Louisiana, which has the country's highest number of COVID cases per capita. Here is Governor John Bell Edwards.
Do you give a damn? I hope you do. I do. I've heard it said often, Louisiana is the most pro-life state in the nation. I want to believe that. It ought to mean something. In this context, it ought to mean something.
All right, well, there is your stand-up, Pete Dominic, Governor Roundup, gubernatorial Roundup. You heard from a whole bunch of governors and about governors, and now I want to play for you another prominent American, a very influential one, maybe as influential as waning. I hope so. He's one of the most evil of all time. I've met him and been around him too many times. His name is Newt Gingrich. He was on Fox News, Business News, and he was spouting the most racist of all theories, the replacement theory. And I wanted to share it with you because you got to hear it.
Look, they don't come all the way across Mexico for the purpose of visiting for 2 days. They want to be in America. And I think what's hard for most of us to accept is that the anti-American left would love to drown traditional, classic Americans.
Oh, hold on a second. Who are traditional, classical American? Who are they? How does one identify? Can you just look? Can you see them coming? Do we eat at a certain place? Is it an IHOP crowd? Maybe a Cracker Barrel crowd? What does that mean?
With as many people as they can who know nothing of American history, nothing of American tradition, nothing of the rule of law. And I think that when you go and you look at the radical left, this is their ideal model, is to get rid of the rest of us because we believe in George Washington or we believe in the Constitution. And you see this behavior over and over again.
What does it mean to believe in George Washington? We know you don't believe in the Constitution. We know that you just use that whenever it's convenient. Same as the idea that you follow the rule of law. I mean, you're trying to overturn the election. What could be more opposite of supporting the rule of law than that, old Newt? Never forget when Newt Gingrich was at the Aspen Ideas Fest, and we went to some billionaire's house for some after event, some dinner event, and the organizers said, "Hey, are you going over, on the shuttle to the house?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Can you give Newt and Callista Gingrich their credentials?" And I said, "Yes, sure. All right, this is surreal." Anyway, I'd met him before, and I guess we were familiar with each other, and I went to give him his credentials, and I went to put it over his head like a medal. It was like on a lanyard, with his name tag, and he let me. And then I went to put his wife's on, and she would not let me, which is fine. It's just, but my thing was, I thought she was worried about me messing up her hair, which is perfect. Anyway, that's my Newt Gingrich story for now. And a couple more clips for you. Here is Simone Biles on the Today Show with Hoda Kotb talking about, recapping her experience and getting honest, very honest. Listen to this.
You know what struck me when I interviewed you before the Olympics? You talked about there were a lot of reasons you wanted to compete again.
Right.
And one of them was because you didn't want people to forget what happened with Larry Nassar.
Yes.
You're still here. You said, I'm still here. Did that weigh on you at all?
A little bit, but I knew that still being the face of kind of like gymnastics in the USA and everything we've brought, it's not going to be buried under the rug, and it will still be a very big conversation. So we still have to protect those athletes and figure out why it happened, who knew what when, and just...
Do you think that affected you at all this time around?
Now that I think of it, like maybe in the back of my head, probably yes, because there are certain triggers that you don't even know.
Yeah.
And I think it could have.
Yet there you were in the stands, man.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I wonder if Simone's going to kind of take her sweats and go hang out in the corner.
Right.
No, you did not.
No, I had to cheer on my girls. They worked too hard, and I was going to be there to support them.
Oops, sorry about that. Well, go over and watch the whole interview at the Today Show. Also learned that apparently she lost her aunt during this time. While she was at the Olympics, her aunt tragically died. So a lot going on there. And hopefully we can move on, and she can move on and take this as a really positive experience. Sounds like that is how she's looking at it. And that won't stop the haters, but I think the people who supported her and are impressed by her and inspired by her are far more than those that have been criticizing her, which is exclusively a pretty similar group of people who tend to criticize strong, independent, confident, successful, inspiring women, especially women of color. It seems like they certainly single them out a lot more. But nonetheless, I think her experience has been very, very educational and inspiring, and super happy to see her win the bronze medal on the beam. I watched that. I don't know how they do that. I don't understand how you can do a backflip and land on a balance beam. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Okay. So one more thing that I saw yesterday that I wanted to play for you, and thought this was pretty good. This is like 2 minutes, and this is going around today. It's not really something from the last 24 hours necessarily, but who cares? We can break the rules. I saw Dr. Deborah Spiner sharing this, longtime listener and supporter, as well as others, and this high school student named Christopher Justice, of all names, explaining the Confederate flag and its inherent problems. Listen to this.
flag, like what it's like, how the war started, it's kind of evolved into like a racial thing when really it was not started as a racial thing at all. And I think that like it should absolutely be flown, like publicly.
Any other opinions as far as agreeing with him or disagreeing with him? Okay, Mr. Justice.
You do have a right to fly it. I do not think it should be flown on public property, like in front of a state house. You can also fly it at protests. But he mentioned misconceptions. There are no misconceptions about that flag. The flag that we see today is not actually the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag is similar to that of the United States. It has a blue upper right-hand corner with 7 stars in a circle, 2 red stripes, and in the middle a white stripe. The flag we see today is an interpretation of a Confederate battle flag. And the interpretation went up in the 1960s, around the time the Civil Rights Movement started. And to the point where it's not racially motivated, then how come it's a symbol for so many groups like the KKK and the National Socialist Movement, who, as you all probably know, have white supremacist and neo-Nazi ideologies? Also, I find it ironic that people claim to be patriots when they fly that flag. The Confederates stabbed the Union in the back. They shot first, they murdered 500,000 American soldiers, and they argued that it was because of states' rights. I ask, states' rights to do what? What were we considering getting rid of at the time? Not guns, we weren't trying to raise taxes, it was slavery. We were trying to stop the expansion of slavery to the West. The Southern aristocracy panicked and left the Union. They said, we are not Americans, we are from the South, so we're starting our own country. And then they proceeded to launch numerous terrorist attacks against the Union, shooting at Fort Sumter, murdering 200 people in Lawrence, Kansas.
Okay, now, Chris.
Yeah, kids in high school. It's unbelievable. So good. Loved that, and wanted to share that with you. That's all I got time for in today's news segment, for the audio clips at least. I do want to give you the rest of the headlines, whatever else I can find. It's time for the news dump, if not just to play a jingle from Pete Coe. Hit it, Pete.
Florida man in cat enclosure over the barrier jumps. He's violently mauled by jaguars on today's news dump.
I hope that Florida man is the governor of Florida, Rick DeSantis. I have no problem with a jaguar attacking him. Can you wish like a terrible violent thing on a prominent public person that is very unlikely to happen? Like, I feel like you can somehow, society and culture let you get away with it. I'm going to leave that in today's podcast. I want a jaguar to jump on the governor of Florida. Then I want that jaguar's name to be Biden. Okay, so let's get to some of the headlines from the last 24. Well, the news I woke up to yesterday was pretty disappointing because I haven't let anybody know where I'm going on vacation for a specific reason. It was because it was to President Obama's birthday party. Yeah, I was headed to Martha's Vineyard, but now the party has been canceled. And if anybody believes that, I guess I am a lot... You think I'm a lot more impressive than I actually am. I'm not. I was not invited, and I was never going. And I'm still not telling you where I'm going, unless you reach out to me, and then I'll tell you, and I'll have to see you there. So, yeah, Obama scaled back the birthday bash amid COVID. I think he had to do that. The party was planned for months, but changed in light of the Delta variant. I do want to know who's still coming. I mean, Oprah, Prince Harry, Spielberg, Hanks, Chris Rock, Denzel. Come on, who's going to be there? I heard Pearl Jam was supposed to perform. Is that still happening? Anyway, so yeah, Obama canceled the birthday party, and that was like a distraction. It was literally a distraction for the Biden administration and Democrats and progressive agenda. They were being asked about it in the White House press briefing, and Senator John Edwards was critical that Obama was still having some people. Guy's such an asshole. In Wisconsin, officials canceled 205,000 voter registrations. How about that? Wisconsin election officials have deactivated more than 205,000 voter registrations from the rolls as part of a routine work to keep the state's registration lists up to date. Purging voters from the rolls has been a major point of contention in the perennial swing state. Conservatives filed a lawsuit demanding that Wisconsin Election Commission remove voters from the rolls if they didn't respond to mail-ins within 30 days, which, of course, is cheating, which is just, I mean, they're coming up with ways to kick people off the voter rolls. But activists there, I'm sure, are going to do everything they can to make sure everybody who wants to vote, has access to vote, will get to vote. It's a great team of progressives, Democrats up there working on that. A new study saying the flu shot is linked to less severe COVID-19. Those who got flu shots were less likely to end up in the emergency room. I wonder how accurate that study is. Interesting nonetheless. I thought this was an interesting story. Target is joining a growing list of retailers and restaurant chains offering educational assistance at select online institutions for its frontline employees in a fiercely competitive job market. And I don't know, I remember this growing up. Wegmans grocery store where I grew up, which is a pretty big deal in the Northeast now. They paid for your college tuition, I think, for an associate's degree or something like that, or maybe more. My cousin's got that. But, yeah, so Target said that it plans to spend $200 million over the next 4 years to offer its workers free undergraduate and associate degree programs, as well as certificates in business-oriented majors at select institutions. Also, textbooks will be free. So good on Target for doing that, but just it's an interesting move for a large employer to attract employees because they're having, there's so much competition right now. So I was happy to see that. I'm sure they could do a lot more than that, and so could even, a lot more big employers and small employers, I think, too. It's a great benefit, education. Spirit Airlines is canceling flights for the third consecutive day. They say the cancellations are due to operational challenges. As of Wednesday afternoon, Spirit cancels 418 flights, or 60% of its daily operations. I can't think of anything worse for an airline outside of an accident, a crash, than to be having high-profile flight cancellations. Who wants to fly even if it's cheap, even if it's Greyhound with wings? Who wants to fly, book a flight that's going to possibly canceled? Not good for Spirit. Thought this was an interesting story worth mentioning. Back in 2019, Japan gave a gift to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, a $5,800 bottle of whiskey. I love Japanese whiskey, if anybody's looking for a gift for me. Now, the State Department is saying it has no idea where that bottle of whiskey went, and it's investigating its whereabouts. It's against the law, apparently, to take a gift from a foreigner over $390. Mike Pompeo is saying he knows nothing about the bottle, but sources inside his house are saying that there's an empty bottle that looks exactly like the one given to Mike Pompeo. I just made up the sources inside his house. Sorry. A lot of fans wondering where Jimmy Kimmel is. A lot of fans of the late-night TV show have been wondering. He hasn't been on TV since July 5th. So, but apparently not to worry. His absence has nothing to do with any health issues regarding him or his family. Instead, it's apparently his personal decision to take a much-needed vacation, and I'm going to follow his lead next week and do just that myself. I hope that's okay with you. All right, well, that is your news dump. A lot more news stories, but I have got to wrap this up and get to my first guest, who I'm very excited to welcome back on the show. He is one of your all-time favorites. A lot of people see that he's on and say it's a must-listen every single time. He is a writer, a commentator, a lawyer, and a playwright. He's now a columnist at the Daily Beast. He's a senior fellow at the Western State Center and Auburn Seminary. His work has been in the New York Times, where he is a contributing op-ed writer. He's been a CNN commentator, and so many more really cool titles. He's got a new book coming out in January, which I'm very excited to receive a galley copy of. It's called Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American, scheduled for spring 2022. Okay, he is a father, he is a husband, he's a really good friend of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Wajahat Ali on Twitter, and he opens the show by making fun of my shed studio lighting, which is a pinkish purple color. If you haven't seen it on the YouTube or clips, check it out. youtube.com/standupwithpete. Here we go with Wajahat Ali.
We're there in the shed. I'm like, the purple stuff finally took Pete's soul, absorbed him. The purple stuff that's been growing for the last 6 months has finally taken over.
There's a lot to address with you. I want to get right to it.
Do it.
You shared a photograph of you as a child. You've been very open and honest about your struggle with your weight, and you've said in many different ways that you were a fat boy. You shared.
I was healthy. I was big boned.
You have said that some of your struggle comes from being, or at least you said you were fat. Maybe you weren't struggling. Did you think were you a stud? You shared this picture the other day. I look at it like a couple times an hour since. It's astonishing.
Yeah, it's bait. It's bait for bullies and comedians, basically.
Yes.
You've been salivating ever since I shared it because you're like, oh man, if I could just go back in the DeLorean and pick on Waj, that would give me like material for 2 weeks.
Well, I didn't know, but you're giving me too much credit. What I said was I'm not going to pick on. I wouldn't have picked on your weight. I wouldn't have picked on your skin color, but I would have definitely ridiculed your shirt and pants. I would have, and so I apologized for me in a parallel universe because I would have had I known you. What do you want to say about your silk shirt at age 10?
That was the silk shirt that my mother thought would make me look quote unquote cool from Mervyn's, that she made me wear with the pleated pants from hell that just needed more pleats. It's like Christopher Walken when it comes to cowbell. Yeah. It goes, I need more pleats. So for those of you who have not seen this photo, it's a pleated pant from hell with a full sleeved silk shirt with a button topped. And I tucked in the shirt, and my mother at this event that we were going to, some community event, said, you will look so handsome. And I'm like, are you sure? She goes, I'm your mother. I bought this from Mervyn's. Of course, trust me. And so I'm like, finally, the cool kids will invite me to sit at their table, and the pretty girls that I like will like me. And there was just like a table of Pete Dominics. So I was just destroyed.
Yeah.
And I was very healthy and fat.
Well, and that a lot of people, when you shared that photo and talked about those clothes in the store, Mervyn's, they were familiar with this. I've never heard of this. Is this a West Coast?
Oh, I do. I did not know that. Yeah. No, Mervyn's was the store where like all parents or immigrant parents used to take us, and they used to like dress us there to like high school, and it was always connected to the mall. It was like J.C. Penney on one side, Mervyn's on the other side, and like Macy's in the middle. Because like if you got some FU money and you moved on up, then you went to Macy's. But for most of us, we went to like J.C. Penney, Sears, Mervyn's, and then a couple of years ago, Mervyn's went bankrupt, and all of us poured our root beer in memory of Mervyn's. So I had no idea there was a West Coast thing. I thought everyone knew Mervyn's.
No, it was just no. I never heard of it. But
it's just tragedy because it was like all those brands that were like asymptotic to cool but weren't. And so used to go there and like just shop, and then that's where we got the silk shirt with a little bit of a discount. And all of us thought we were cool because all of our parents went to Mervyn's, and then we went to the real world and realized that we were dorks.
Yeah.
And you probably shouldn't wear a fully sleeved silk shirt at an event with pleated pants.
I applaud your courage. You sharing that photo on Twitter for us to see here in 2021. It showed a lot of confidence. And I'll say, I understand why you feel insecure about your looks, because I've always kind of struggled with you being self-deprecating, because I've always said you're a very handsome guy. You have a very leading man look. You're a good-looking guy, but yet you had a fat face, and so you still are that boy, but even though you're not anymore.
So it's a really interesting comment. You have been very homoerotic towards me, and I've always appreciated it because it's been very sincere platonic praise. Even back in the serious days. And my wife also says, you're a handsome guy. Like I've always found you attractive. And then women have said that. But the reason why, and this is, I think anyone will identify with this who's listening, who was a former fat kid. I have never in my entire career, and I mean this with utmost sincerity, even though I've been on TV, I co-hosted a show, have ever assumed that was due to my looks.
Right.
I never thought that people thought I was good looking. I never thought I was ugly, but I was like, oh, they like me because I work hard and I'm a good writer and I can be funny and I can be witty. And it's only that, when I enter a room, I have to work the crowd. That's how I got my wife. I always joke with her, like when I enter a room, no one says, here's the pretty boy.
Yeah.
Like, here's an awkward dude who came in. And then I have to, like 10 minutes later, once they start listening to me, then the women start surrounding me. Right. So whenever people say, Waj, you're always just being too self-deprecating, I'm tired of your bullshit, man. You're a handsome guy. In my mind, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm the fat kid.
Well,
and the former fatties in our mind's eye were always that fat kid.
Right. Then that's exactly what I'm saying. I get it now. After seeing that photo, I get it now. It's funny that you said that about I've always said the same thing about myself. Like, I don't walk into a bar and women turn and go, "Oh my God, look at that!" Music starts playing. I gotta work it. I gotta make jokes. I gotta build trust, which is why that's the back end of a joke I do about why I could never have an open marriage, because my wife could go out right now and meet a guy and hook up tonight, and I'd have to work it for like 3 months to build trust and show humor and.
It's just too much work. That's why I tell Sarah, I'm like, 'cause Sarah, like, your wife's like Sarah, like, she could just smile and get a guy, like, immediately. Like, I have to put in the investment, the time. I have to charm them. I'm too old. You know, I tell her, I say, I'm too lazy to cheat on you. She goes, "Wow, that's amazing. Thank you." I'm
really...
like, she thinks it's for loyalty. I'm like, look, it's loyalty and love also, but like the amount of work that I got to put in to this hustle, it's just not worth it.
I don't understand. That's why I legitimately, it's my least important question about men specifically who have affairs. Like, how did you do, like, how did you meet a person long enough to convince them to have sex with you? That doesn't happen. That takes months.
The subterfuge, like the amount of time it takes to maintain the subterfuge. Yeah. Like, you have to create a different Tinder account and then a different name, and then hope like a friend doesn't see you, and then like you have to find time in your schedule to like flirt with this woman, and then go on at least 3 dates before sex. But maybe they do 1 date sex now. I don't know. And then you like eventually she'll find out, and then you have to then like charm her enough where she keeps quiet. And I'm like, it's just too much.
Have you ever, to pivot into a more serious and important conversation, have you ever just run your finger down a woman who works for you's spine and then whisper in her ear and think that's okay?
And kiss her on the forehead because I'm a Pakistani uncle, and that's how we greet women?
Yeah, let's talk about the Andrew Cuomo scandal as it relates to several things. And, you know, it's very interesting to see the kind of Joe Biden's, I'm not comparing them, but you hear this a lot, Joe Biden and Andrew Cuomo, talking about the way that they touch has to do with traditions and ethnicity and the way that they were touched. And by the way, sure does. Yes. And even when it's the most well-intentioned, least harmful, it still makes people feel uncomfortable. My grandfather kissed me on the lips, and what I didn't like was his mustache. Up until I was like 6 years old, I remember that he did that. And that was weird. It's weird to think about now, but that's what he did. That's what his family did. There's a lot of things. But if you don't realize at this point what's appropriate in the workplace, if you're a high-profile person, public person, not to mention if you're just like, what do you make of the ethnic? And do they have those? What are the Pakistani like touching?
We don't touch anyone. Like I don't think I've ever seen my parents kiss each other like ever, and they love each other. Like they have an amazing marriage, right? Like we're the opposite extreme. Like if we say I love you, and if they touch you, you think they're like you probably think they either have dementia or they're about to die.
Hold on, come on. You're Pakistani. You're in town. You see your cousin. You see a friend. What do you shake hands? What do you do?
Yeah, we're not touchers. Like you'll hug, but there's not kissing is a very European thing, right? Like the kissing on the cheeks, the kissing on the lips. That's like pretty hardcore. Yeah, there's love and there's affection. Like if you go to some Muslim majority countries, you'll see grown men holding hands, and you're like, is everyone gay here? What happened? And they're like, no, these are two straight guys. I mean, some of them might be gay, but oftentimes, very otherwise heterosexual men married, they're like, no, this is how we show affection. We hold hands. So there is something like that. But when it comes to especially opposite gender, right, it is very rare for you to see someone ever like hugging, holding their hand, kissing them, even though it's done out of, in some cultures, like, Italians, they do it, or in France, there is a culture and etiquette there. However, you can't use that as an excuse when you have been repeatedly told by the woman that you are touching and kissing. That makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. When you can see that the woman's uncomfortable, when you live in an environment in the United States of America where there are boundaries, and when it's not just a simple, caress on the back, when it is more than that, when it's retaliation and harassment and a climate where a woman feels uncomfortable, where she has to leave, that's when you are using and abusing your power and being a sexual creep and hiding behind the quote-unquote ethnicity card. Yeah. And you make it horrible for the rest of us who use the race card to really call out racism when it exists.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Before I ask you another Cuomo, just specifically about him, I wanted to ask you what you thought was I think is the coolest cultural greeting I like, especially given COVID, where we probably shouldn't be touching anyway. I've never been a big fan of handshaking and stuff. I mean, I'll shake anybody's hand. more of a hugger, maybe even. But I like a little bow. I like a little like a Japanese. Who else does that? I'm in for I'd like to normalize a little bow, like 10 feet away, 5 feet away.
No, but you can't be Obama and doing it because then you become a Muslim, apparently. And you're bowing to the overlords. But I like the bow, the hand over the heart. That's like a very traditional Muslim thing. You see someone and you put your hand on your heart, right? And bow. And people, so what happens is everyone's different, but some Muslims who are traditional or some Muslims who are a bit uncomfortable, just out of respect to hug women or in the workplace. I had some friends who are like, bro, like people, I know they're well-intentioned. I know they're not trying to get anything, but they come and they see me and they hug. And I'm married and I'm trying to be a good Muslim guy and I'm kind of uncomfortable to hug. So what I do is I preemptively block that by doing a little bow and putting my hand like on my chest, which is kind of traditional greeting. And people are like, oh, these backwards men. But now in the age of COVID, people are like, that's really lovely. That's sweet. Or the little bow or like the elbow dabs. I would love not to go back to handshaking because people are filthy in this country.
Yeah.
And I think, it depends upon, it depends upon the intention. I do think intention matters, but sometimes regardless of your intention, it's the action and how that action makes another person feel. Right. So you can sit there and be like, it's a well-intentioned guy. I grabbed the woman and I kissed both cheeks. That's what we used to do in the old country. But you're like, yo, this is 2021 and I understand your intention, but that makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's a power differential here.
Yeah.
Where if I did, this is huge. If I were to say something and offend you, that would look detrimentally upon me. And I know then based on human relationships, you would probably be cold and distant with me and I'll lose my job and my promotion. So all of it is to say that this benefits only that man in power and he gets to cop a feel. And I, as a Muslim and as a Desi guy who's not a toucher, I express, I touch my wife and like my kids and, I'm very effusive with my love for them. But I can tell you guys, you can survive without kissing and hugging a woman and a female colleague. Trust me. There are other ways for you to show your appreciation and your love and your enthusiasm, the fact that they're your colleague, your employer, your friend. You do not have to kiss them or hug them.
How do you feel about cultures and traditions that when upon meeting people, they do the jerk off motion? How do you think?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like it's not subtle. Like it's right to the point. I'm offended when they don't finish, like when they just give it 3 pumps. And then I'm like, are you saying that I'm not worth a full jerk off?
Right. Right.
Where's the finish? The dismount.
Okay. Well,
commit to it. Let me put it this way. If you initiate the jerk off, you have to go all in for me.
Yes. Yeah. I think a commitment is really.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can joke about it and you're a good sport to always go it and take it further. And I appreciate that about you. But I do think when I watch that today,
you were pissed. I saw your tweets.
When I watch Andrew Cuomo say that a young woman came to him and said, I wanted to join your team because I'd been harassed in the past. I'd been assaulted in the past. And I know you're a no nonsense guy and you've got no tolerance policy because he's very public about that he thought that was wrong and that's never acceptable. So this young woman comes to work for him, says that she'd been, harassed and assaulted in the past. And then he says today, we hear this from him today. And he talks about ostensibly what I think is his daughter, or someone close to him, he says, going through something, and he knows how it feels, and then he preys upon her. She says, I've had this happen to me before, I trust you, and he uses it on her, and it's so unbelievably grotesque, and even that he included it in his message, like no one told him. Does he have any friends left? I was so deeply grossed out and found that to be just horrible for this young woman.
Well, it just shows you that power is blind to its own privilege and its abuses of power. And he has rationalized this type of predatory behavior in his mind. You could tell perhaps by saying, I'm a good guy. That's the whole thing, right? Like men have to rationalize their goodness and their niceness to women as they perpetuate misogyny and just disgusting sexual harassment. But I'm not like Trump. I'm not like Gates. I didn't have sex with her. I didn't rape her. My intentions were good. That's why I hired her for the first place. And then they rationalize their otherwise deviant, unacceptable behavior by giving themselves this narrative. And you saw that narrative play out publicly where this is how Cuomo most likely rationalized his predatory behavior. Like, and I feel like he's so fickle, and he's so arrogant, and so not used to being criticized, and with that type of macho bravado that he cannot apologize and will not apologize, and that he felt like, oh, it was totally normal for me to share this story in a public setting after this damning result.
Yeah.
It just shows you how lost he is in his own world.
Also, how much power do you have or think you have to sexually assault an employee while she's armed with a pistol? Like, he preyed on this state trooper while she was armed. He's like touching her.
Because he knew. He goes, nothing's going to happen to me. That's exactly it. That's power. What are you going to do, state trooper? I'm the governor of New York. My name is Cuomo. Do you know who I am? He didn't have to say it. His name says it, right? And the way he postures and the way these men have done it, Epstein, Trump, Kavanaugh, this type of circle jerk, incestuous group of privileged, overwhelmingly white men. There's also Cosby, who knew that their wealth, their power, their stature, and the power differential that exists due to their name and their fame, they can prey with impunity. They can prey with impunity. And that's why you feel bad. Like when women say nothing changes, like you can feel the despair because they see a guy like Kavanaugh become a Supreme Court justice. They see a guy like Matt Gaetz literally feted and honored by the Republican Party. You see Donald Trump, who just raised $100 million despite having, 24 cases against him. Do you see, let's be honest, Bill Clinton, for years, beloved by liberals.
But I have to think that these public situations, issues, crises, scandals, that it does change the next generation, that it does educate this generation, whoever a guy is. I don't know. I always find myself, searching my mind, thinking about every interaction I've ever had with a woman, anytime there's a high profile thing. And today I came up with when I was an RA at acting school and the new students would come in, I did that. I would go to those orientations so I could meet the new girls. That's what I came up with today. Yeah. But like the point being, I think a lot of people are searching themselves and trying to do better and think what they might have done or what they could do. And I want to believe that is the change that we want to see, and that you're raising your kids that way. I'm raising my kids right from wrong in 2021 on these issues. I do feel like it's got to be changing to some extent, even though you make a great point about how it's not with all those people supporting those people.
Yeah, so that's a good a good confession, I guess, in the sense that you're trying. And I asked my wife also. I asked her actually recently. I said, how am I? How's my behavior? And she just laughed. She goes, "You're the most awkward man I've ever met." When women try to with you, it's the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in my life. I give like a side uncle pat. But she also said, "Listen, I know you. I know what I married. You're a charming guy, and you can't help it. And every time we go to a social event, there's women surrounding you because you're always telling stories." So she goes, I know who I married also, and I know you love women, but I know you're loyal and decent, and I know you don't touch, and I trust you. And I'm like, okay, good. And I trust her also, even though men are always swarming her. Like I've had men check out and literally hit on my wife in front of me. And I just laugh and my wife has no idea, right? But there's a trust there. But not only is there a trust there, I think doing that audit is important. And I think this moment is also important because it makes us like revisit what was acceptable in the 80s. I'll give you a quick example. You ever watch Revenge of the Nerds?
Yeah, I don't remember anything about it, though.
Okay. The funny movie that we used to see in the 80s, right? But there's like a straight up rape scene in that movie. Where the lead nerd has a Darth Vader mask on, and the pretty cheerleader that he's always wanted, they're in like the hall of horrors, right? Like the mirror in a fun fair. And she thinks she's having sex with her boyfriend who is wearing the Darth Vader hat, but she ends up having sex with this nerd. And like the guy has sex with her, and after the fact, he's like, "It's me." And she goes, "Ah, ha, ha, ha." And you're like, watching it now, you're like, this is extremely inappropriate. Or even that movie, 16 Candles. I always hated that movie because of the
I just want it for the record for the audience. I laughed at that.
Yeah, that was because you're just like, what? And then 16 Candles. Remember that scene where the girlfriend of the guy that Molly Ringwald wanted, she's just passed around because she was drunk in the car, and all the nerds come and like have sex with her. And you sit there now and you're like, oh crap, this was family entertainment. And this was completely acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And so my hope is that the next generation, you can look, it goes both ways, man. The next generation can be like, this is disgusting, we're going to change. Or the next generation can say, Donald Trump is president and he's a God king for
I got to think that, Jesus Christ, I don't know what our culture is raising boys to be. But I do feel like it's raising women to recognize a different type of thing. Like, so I don't know. I mean, I'm biased because I'm watching my daughters grow up for sure.
Right.
And I like to think that, boys are waking up to the changes and to this new wave of feminism. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yes and no. I'm skeptical because the alt-right gets its greatest recruits or these movements with young college men.
Yeah, but aren't they? But aren't they the minority and they're just really loud? Like, how do we measure when there's just like a loud chorus? Like the Simone Biles thing struck me as there was very few critics, but they were so loud and it's so outrageous that you get so triggered by it, and they know it, and that's why they're doing it. But there's really only a few fakers. So I wonder if what you're saying is that it's a minority but they're really loud and it's so impactful that you think it's...
I think so, because you look at the rise of militia movements, you look at the rise of Trumpism, you look at the rise of violent extremists, and we've talked about this on your show before. I've said this before. The DNA oftentimes of violent extremist movements is very similar.
Yeah.
What radicalizes people, why they join these groups, the ideology, the romanticized past, this black and white life, how they find purpose, whether it's ISIS or whether it's a gang, whether it's white supremacist movements. But specifically, another aspect that ties both of them together all the time is rampant misogyny. The men have a place, the women have the place, and the men have to be on top. And they utterly hate feminists, and they're against the emasculation of men. Right. And so you see what's happening with Trumpism. What is it? Men can be men again. And what does that mean? That means a guy like Cuomo can thump his chest and be a man, be like King Kong, or like a guy like Trump. He's a real man, even though it's hilarious and ridiculous because this guy, has the softest hands on earth.
Yeah.
Literally the guy's never labored in his life.
Right.
But the whole concept is men can be men. What does that often mean? Men can be boorish. Men can treat women like meat. Men are on top. Women are subservient. And so my fear is that, yes, there is a moment of reckoning, but unless we really tackle this at a systemic level, like racism, it will perpetuate. And instead what you get is a lot of nice bros who say, I'm a nice guy. I've done the audit. I've read Chimamanda, right? I've read the feminist track, but they end up being these boorish, sexually frustrated, gross dudes.
We have to do something. Me and you and Jason and Ellie, we're going to do a bonfire. We're going to talk just about men and boys and just going to share, like, just kill each other, making each other laugh and making fun of each other about just the times that we ourselves struggled with our own kind of masculinity and all of that, and just joke about it and talk about it. I just want to keep talking about it with men that are like you and me and those guys. And because I think this conversation that we have that people listen to, it synthesizes some of the ways that they feel that they don't necessarily have articulated to them or have heard those ways being articulated, especially you and I, and anybody who's funny is just making fun of it all.
I think it's important, right? Because oftentimes, even my generation, I think our generation, you talk to a lot of guys who act, men act and perform, and we have to always be men. And that definition of men is never showing vulnerability, never showing pain. You can never cry unless an alligator eats your arm and you're bleeding to death, then maybe. You can never show weakness, and you have to portray yourself as this like stoic Spartan individual and just lock everything inside, and then you get a heart attack at the age of 50 and you just die.
Yes, but seriously, that's the point. There's so much data pointing to men dying far earlier than they should have had they not been under so much stress, and the stress comes from not talking, from hiding your feelings. And to me, I always like to spin it and say there's nothing tougher or more masculine than actually admitting your vulnerabilities, than being vulnerable, than confronting your demons. Like, that's tough. That's really hard. It's very hard to do. So that makes you a tough guy.
We don't have permission, and oftentimes we don't have role models, and oftentimes we don't have the language. And so you see men just suffer quietly.
Yes.
Like, how you doing, bro? I'm good, bro. I'm not a little bitch, bro. I'm not a bitch. And you're like, what? But your arm is cut off and you're bleeding. It's okay, man. It's okay. It's just a flesh wound. And they're like, oh, you just went through a divorce. How you doing? I'm cool. F her. You're like, really? That was a wonderful 10-year relationship. It seems like you're heartbroken. You want to talk about it? No, dog. I don't do that shit, dog. I don't talk about my feelings. Do I have a vagina? No, I go pound some vagina. That's what I do. And like you see so many friends who are just like, look, I'll say at this age, I have friends who are depressed. I have friends who are anxious. I have friends who have mental health issues. I have friends who have marital issues. I have friends who have, work issues under immense stress. And I have friends who are psychiatrists and psychologists. And they're like, bro, most of my clients are guys you wouldn't believe, guys who outwardly you'd see them and you're like, they have it. They got the wife, they got the kids, they got the car, they got the job. You're like, they have achieved the American dream, and these guys are miserable. They're depressed and they're anxious and they can't talk to anybody and they can't talk to their wives, so they come talk to me. That's a problem.
I'd like to hear from more psychiatrists as to what they're hearing in their sessions. That's actually very interesting to me, because I talked with
a good Pete podcast. If you could get a psychiatrist, I'm sure talking about politics, and there's so many now, but like, what are men saying to you? Because you and I independently have been like talking about this. I've been fascinated by this. I have a son. I want to make sure my son grows up to be, healthy and confident and kind and compassionate, and doesn't like get, misled by these utterly unrealistic, toxic role models. They're just like this whole concept of like John Wayne. John Wayne is a fraud, but John Wayne and Gary Cooper, who are actors, are these quote unquote role models for American men, which is hilarious because John Wayne was a surfer who got injured and then farted his way into acting and became this Western icon, and we base so much of American masculinity on a fictional construct, which I find hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I think that for someone, your son is going to be watching you. He's just going to watch every single thing that you do, and there will be no pop culture or actor person who is going to have the impact that you do. So I have very little concern about what kind of a man he's going to be because of what kind of man you are, and you role model that behavior. Then it's undeniable. I mean, we're all a product of whoever our dad is, if you had a relationship with him or even if you didn't. I mean, it's I hope so, man. That's the main thing is like it's in the home, nothing beats though. They always blame heavy metal for everything and then rap. Yeah. And I'm like, basically anything to just blame black people in this country. And you see this, the right wing, it's the culture, and like the liberals. And I'm like, oh, who are your role models? Friggin' Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz and Kavanaugh. What's happening in your homes? But that's, I take it very seriously because I know my son role models and like what you say and how I treat my wife and how I treat my daughters. And the hope is, we talk about this as parents. The hope is they take all the good and none of the bad. But as we know, kids absorb everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And so the hope is each generation just gets better. The only thing that was really surprising me is that you admitted on Twitter that you only stopped using the F word to talk about gay men as a result of learning that Matt Damon only stopped using the F word. I was surprised that you needed to learn that from Matt Damon.
I mean, listen, Good Will Hunting was very inspirational. And once I realized that even Will Hunting was using the F word against the queers, I'm like, what? And then I asked my kid, I'm like, can I use queer? And they're like, yeah, maybe, but just be respectful. And I'm like, you're taking everything from me. It was a dark day, Pete.
Dude, you are the best improv. I could throw anything at you, and you literally had to go with that. You had to go with my situation that I created, where you are worse. By the way, I felt a little bad for Matt Damon on that. I felt like that was a little misconstrued.
He's also, and this is also,
like, he's not calling people the F word. He's in Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I was with you. Look, I was with you in the sense that I'm from Matt Damon's generation, and this is not an excuse. And you know how casually that word was used?
Yeah.
And he's from Boston.
Yeah.
And we could be like, yo, in Boston, the F word means you call your friend an F word. And that's not to excuse it or excuse the use of it, but he was also trying to be honest and he was trying to learn from it. So it's one of those situations you're like, yo, I think the good take was if even Matt Damon working in Hollywood, who's educated and liberal, is using this word as of like 2 weeks ago, it just goes to show you there's still problems.
Yeah. And also, listen, if your child comes in and tells you the way that you're behaving is really unacceptable at this point in time in culture, and you listen to your child and you say, you know what, you're right. Like, that's good role. That's good. I guess I just don't want to impugn somebody for learning a lesson, you know,
even if it's late in life. Yeah, and that's the ugliness of the hellscape that is Twitter and social media, is that no good intention goes unpunished. And even when someone is trying to say, like, I'm trying to get better, they get piled on. Yeah. And what it instead does, and people don't like hearing this, is human beings say, well, I'm not going to share anything.
Right.
Or they'll say, what's the point of me changing? No matter what I do, I get killed.
Yeah.
And this is what great recruitment for the alt-right. They'll always hate you if you're a white straight male. They'll always hate you. Yeah. You can never win.
Yeah.
And so I share that nuance with you as well.
Yes, good. I mean, it's like there was people I respect saying Matt Damon is garbage, and maybe he is, but I've seen nothing in this situation or anything else that says that necessarily. And the idea of it's going to turn someone like him away, and we need people like him who are influential, progressive-minded people not to be turned away so easily. You can't just like start calling people like that when they're literally making improvements in their life, and especially, as you said, when they're older, when it's harder to change.
Yeah, and that's the balance that I'm always trying to, because just Twitter and social media, it brings out the worst in us, right? This immediate impulse, and you get a hot take, and people say something, and then people are terrified. You want to give people an escape route. That's what I always tell people. Even when it comes to radicalization, you have to give people an off-ramp, because if people don't, and maybe this is where I'm too generous, I don't think so, though. If you give people an off-ramp, there's always a chance of redemption. And that narrative is that I made a mistake, but I can be better. If you give no off-ramp, what people say instead is, F it, born to lose.
Right.
I'll go all in.
It's a great point, and very well said. I like that a lot. One of those moments in a taped conversation where I want to be like, let me think about that a little bit before I react. That's really interesting.
Because, and it's also the balance. You want to criticize. The anger and the pain that the victims have experienced is real, but also include in that conversation an off-ramp. And what type of society will we become if we offer no off-ramp for anyone to think, reflect, and redeem themselves?
I always get to something simple in my mind, which is I believe in redemption for the worst actions of any human. This doesn't come from a religious point of view. Maybe you can give me your Muslim interpretation or not, but like if you rape or murder somebody, but then you realize what you have done wrong and you better your life, and I believe in that. I believe in that redemption. I believe that you can now be a really valuable member of society who is proof that people can be horrible and change. I think that's great. So if you're talking about rape or murder or crime against a child, if that can be redeemed, so can a thought that you had about black people. Christian Piccolini, former, Klan member who's done great things. Like, so what you're saying is so important, because people, sometimes they do change. Sometimes they do. And they make for great role models and even leaders and inspiring human beings in ways you never imagined that they would.
The balance is redemption has to be earned. It has to be earned through contrition, through accountability, and then there has to be forgiveness. The problem, I think, is the tension that the people who fail up, who complain about cancel culture but are never canceled, have used their power and privilege to bring it full circle to people like Cuomo, and they never have accountability, and they never have any earned redemption, right? It's just superficial, and people who are victims and those who are marginalized keep suffering. And so I think the balance has to be between accountability, but also earned redemption, right? And I feel like, and I agree with you. Some people might be surprised. It's not just as a Muslim, but I know people who've gone to jail. I know people have literally made atrocious mistakes and are different people. And they've served their time and they've come out, right? I know people who used to be like alcoholics and misogynists and just changed their life completely.
Yeah.
And the next 30, 40 years of this thing called life that you get one go at, they were good people. They used their time wisely. I know formers, a Christian, for example, but I know former Nazis. I know former almost jihadis who literally went to the edge and came back and now are trying their best to shape young generations into being responsible, healthy role models, right? So I feel like that this is a tension in society that's going to exist for the next 5-10 years, the tension between accountability and also like forgiveness. But I feel like I'm of the opinion, you and me will probably get hit for this, that even if you do something terrible in life, if you atone for it, if you learn from it, if you pay your dues, there should be a second shot. And in the absence of that second shot, I want to repeat what I said. Imagine what type of society you're creating and what type of narrative you're giving people, which is you F up, you can never redeem yourself. You got to go all in forever. So think twice.
I love you, man. I love that talk. 36 minutes of glorious.
That was awesome.
Admission. Thank you.
And you should be getting the book today or tomorrow. Let me know what you think.
I can't wait. Very excited. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I got to bounce. Take care. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. And there he goes. Go give him a follow on Twitter. Read him at the Daily Beast. Get his book. I don't think it's available for pre-order yet, but it will be soon. But definitely let him know you heard him on the show. He will definitely see that at Wajahat Ali on Twitter. All the links in the show notes. Please let him know that you heard him. Okay. Awesome conversation. Love that. Hopefully you did as well. So I don't know if you heard about this, but the top-rated cable news show is Tucker Carlson, and he took his show to Hungary, where they now have basically an authoritarian, autocratic dictator named Viktor Orban, and a lot of people reacting with great concern that Tucker Carlson, the Fox News star, has gone to Hungary and is touting an authoritarian as a model for the West. And so I reached out to Ruth Ben Giat, who's writing about this, talking about this, and has written a whole book about it. And I was lucky to get her on the show. She is an awesome guest. She is a historian. She's a cultural critic. Her website is ruthbengiat.com, and she's got a great new newsletter called Lucid, which I subscribe to, and I hope that you will as well. Her new book is Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. She's a perfect person to talk to about this, and I had a great conversation, brief but great, with Ruth Ben Giat. Here it is right now. Okay, so as soon as I saw that Fox News propagandist, the biggest guy in all of cable news, really, Tucker Carlson, was in Hungary for a week of broadcasts, I just stopped and tried to think about what that meant. And then I immediately literally went on Twitter to check if Ruth Ben Giat had tweeted or written anything about it. And you, in fact, have. And I am very glad to be talking to you because I actually think this is an extremely important thing, and I want you to tell us why. Thank you for joining me.
Sure. Yeah. As soon as I saw that Carlson was there for a week, and that Orban, the prime minister, they were posting, on social media with each other, I thought, oh, what is this? And unfortunately, what this is Tucker Carlson's views align very well with those of European fascists and autocrats like Orban. And the formal reason he's there is to participate in a conference, giving a speech called modestly, The World According to Tucker Carlson. And that world is very similar to Orban's world. And Orban has very savvily kind of decayed democracy until he rules by decree, and yet has kept his EU funding. So I call him in my essay, a wily political operator. And that's who Tucker Carlson is choosing to legitimize.
Tell us a little bit about what has happened in Hungary and how he rose to power, and, obviously why it matters. And there's a lot of parallels to history in now.
Yeah. So he's an interesting character because he had been a dissident at the end of communism. And during that time, he was friends with George Soros. And George Soros had even helped him, giving him a printer and helping him out to spread his, liberation movement at the end of communism. And Viktor Orban, like other strongmen I've written about, is a supreme opportunist. So he was in power, and he was much more of a centrist. He saw where the wind was blowing, and he's been there again since 2010, and he's become a far rightist with the whole menu of autocratic policies. Some will be familiar because the GOP is trying to do them too, or has done them, with rewarding women for having kids, banning gender studies. You can no longer legally be intersex or transgender in Hungary as of 2020. He has captured the judiciary. He has, ruined press freedom, but he's done it in a different way than Putin. He doesn't poison people. He gets people to comply by, harassing them financially and legally. So he's more subtle, and in a sense, he's very dangerous because of that.
Who's he aligned with? Who are his pals outside of Tucker Carlson, which I'll come back to?
So he has this far right group in European Parliament now with the fascists, basically Matteo Salvini's racist League Party from Italy, Le Pen in France. He with the Prime Minister of Poland, who has copied many of the things that Orban does. And these kind of characters, and Christian Kurz, the Chancellor of Austria, and they unite around anti-immigration, anti-Semitism, some of them. And he's been a mentor to some of these younger politicians. And so, with Tucker Carlson, he's kind of taking him under his wing, but Tucker Carlson's giving him a platform too.
Right. And why does that matter to an American audience? Like Tucker Carlson is no dummy, and he is dominating his time slot and on that network and, quote, cable news overall for a lot of interesting and important reasons. But why take the show to Hungary? And he's also doing, I guess, like a documentary there as well. Like, how does that supposed to translate to his American audience? What are we to think?
Well, back in 2019, when Viktor Orban came to visit Trump, and Trump said he fell in love with him, he said, we're like twins, and their anti-democratic feelings. Tucker Carlson had a big thing about Orban's pro-family, anti-trans policies, and said, the chyron was, should the U.S. be more like Hungary? So Tucker Carlson is putting himself out there on a European plane, making himself a player with the right. We don't know if he has political aspirations, but more scarily for us at home, he's proposing Orban's electoral autocracy, where you don't shut down elections today. You have elections, but you render them almost meaningless. You say they're fraudulent if you don't like these results. You substitute election officials, all the things the GOP is trying to do. So it matters because Tucker Carlson is setting this up as a model for the U.S. at a time the GOP is aggressively moving forward in this direction.
Laying the groundwork for authoritarianism, for an autocrat, is got to be challenging for said authoritarian. But what makes it easier is having powerful people in the media either in your pocket or forcing them to do certain type of reporting and coverage. How important is a Tucker Carlson to a Viktor Orban or to a Donald Trump or some future authoritarian here in the U.S. or elsewhere?
Well, autocrats are always looking for foreign funding and foreign legitimacy because they know perfectly well Orban's also highly corrupt. He's got a son-in-law. Hello. There's always a son-in-law who is in government, who was actually being investigated by the EU for fraud. And then, of course, Hungary shut that down. So he's just as corrupt as all the other ones. So they need legitimacy. They need to be like whitewashed. And here comes Tucker Carlson, who gives him his imprimatur, post on Facebook. So it's like a deal between the two of them. They both benefit.
Where is the, well, are you familiar with, what's going on in Hungary in terms of the public opinion on him, or how he tamps down on actual public opinion and media? Like, what do people in Hungary think about his kind of anti all things gender and sexual orientation, seemingly, not to mention, his just authoritarian leadership? Is there a divide there?
Well, what he does is today you don't shut down the opposition. You keep a pocket of opposition. So at this conference where Tucker Carlson is speaking, there's, some critics of Orban, mild critics who are trotted out, and they have debates, because the key today is to have a veneer of democracy.
Right.
In fact, Orban calls his system illiberal democracy. And that's how he keeps his EU funding. Lots of American businesses are in Budapest. They have, headquarters there or branches. So he's having it both. He's been very successful in having it both ways.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the EU and what pressure can be brought to bear to change any of what he is doing. Is he at odds and with any of the other authoritarian leaders, Ruth, or do they get together on Zoom every Friday night just to give you more to write about?
Well, he's actively been, forging these alliances with France and with Poland in particular, and with the Italian rightists, to have this kind of big group in Parliament. So there's that. And he, in terms of what you were saying before, also, they forced the Soros-funded Central European University. It has to close, and it's moving to Vienna.
That's right.
And
that's right.
There's a lot of, there's no academic freedom anymore. And in terms of is he liked, he's kind of, he gives. It's like the old fascist social welfare programs. He gives subsidies to people who have kids. There's grandparents' assistance if you stay with the kids. Everything to have good, big families, but they're only the right kind of families, right? Jews are on the out, Roma people, nomadic peoples, if you're not, heteronormative sexuality, out. So he says we want Hungary for the Hungarians only. So it's ethno-nationalism. Right, so some people really like that. Sure. And if you're a critic, then he finds way. He doesn't imprison as many people as Erdogan in Turkey, or certainly Putin, but he finds other ways to silence them.
What are you seeing right now here in the U.S. in terms of fascism and authoritarianism? You write about this so well and so much. Unfortunately, there's a lot to write about at Lucid, and I've mentioned this. Mm-hmm. Everybody should subscribe to this very important newsletter that Ruth works very hard on. Where are we at with the investigation to the insurrection, the cult still following Trump seemingly? What's new?
It's, it can't be overstated how important it was to have that testimony by the officers, yep. Because to see them in such anguish, to see also, many Americans are very tired. They're very exhausted from COVID, from all the assaults we had in various ways from the Trump era. And it's really important to have positive heroes now, to have positive role models. So that's there. But the GOP is, steamrolling. It's really January 6th radicalized them further. And although it didn't work in keeping Trump in office, it was this radicalizing, energizing moment for them. And so they are capitalizing it at the state level by, full speed ahead with voter suppression, with repressive social policies, with trying to legislate the memory of racist crimes past and present, to censor it. So all of this is very much in tune with what autocrats do in Europe.
I just wonder how much in history and where this is my analysis, which means very little, but that the media is leading the politicians. It would seem with what's happening, at least in the U.S. It's you could name the names, you could name the networks and the most popular. And it's almost like the policymakers, the politicians aren't themselves influential or maybe intelligent enough to come up with the grift, the lie. And so members of the media do it, and then they follow along. And the reason I say that is if the Tucker Carlsons of the world would stop and be frankly more consistent to their own conservative values and to democracy and the things they used to at least say they believed in, then politicians wouldn't have as much cover to come up with things like voter suppression.
Yeah, and what's really sad is in the history of these, of democracies decaying and then autocracies falling, because all of them fall sooner or later, sometimes it only takes a few really important voices to change, to decide that they're going to chart a different course. And Tucker Carlson could do so much good. I mean, with vaccinations, with many other things, with anti-hate speech. He has a huge influence, a scarily large influence, and yet he's fully dedicated to this fascistic program, and he's going to do as much harm as possible, it looks like.
Yes. Yeah, he really is. I mean, it's working for him, so why wouldn't he? There's seemingly no way to stop a guy like that. Sometimes I think that a big corporate media company like Fox News, you could put pressure, but the advertising is actually not, boycotting advertising means very little. It's not where they're making their money at Fox News. And unless, the Murdochs do something, then we're not going to see anything change on that network, which is on every cable provider, much less all the other alternatives, it would seem, I guess. I don't know what you do.
Yeah. And, but it is a big deal that he's there for a whole week in Hungary, because there is a, section of Republican voters who may not have passports, who may be fairly provincial and maybe not, but they didn't care about Hungary. And so it's a very calculated move that he's going to this autocrat who seems more palatable than Putin, and having a whole, having a whole week of programming there. That's a very big statement.
So important. I'm so glad that you're writing about this and continuing to put out the newsletter. It's great. I learned so much from it. I'm proud to be a subscriber. I did want to ask you, did you see the Olympian, the Belarusian Olympian who decided not to, should, I guess, defect? It's like the old days, it would seem, where you're a competitive athlete, you make it to the highest state, and then you don't go home. You saw that. So what do you make of what's going on in Belarus and the fact that I guess the leader there, Lukashenko, his son, Lukashenko, as you mentioned earlier, there's always a son-in-law. His son runs the Belarusian Olympic Committee, and she was worried she's going to be punished. That's the story. What do you make of that story and the kind of the hallmarks it brings up of the past?
Yeah, I wrote, if you go to my Lucid site, I have an essay called "When Exiles Become Targets." Oh, I didn't see it. Because they not only go after people in the country, if you are out of the country, either permanently as an exile or just representing, and you criticize them, that's it. So she had no choice but to defect, because she would have come home and been imprisoned and hounded and who knows what. And Lukashenko, with Putin's blessing, as we know, has become way more aggressive because he feels threatened. All the mass nonviolent protest recently had its effect, and so that's why he hijacked the plane. He's been pushing the boundaries. But you're right to mention the old days of communist defectors, because this is, at root, this is the culture that these guys come from. They're an age. Putin, too. Who is Putin? He was a KGB official. A case officer in the KGB. So the authoritarian, it's like they're the worst of communist authoritarianism plus the new right. That's the problem. And Orban comes from this too. He was a dissenter of communism at the end, but he was steeped in that kind of repressive state culture. Now he's just a right winger instead of a left winger.
So much more to learn, and I always appreciate when I'm able to ask you these questions, and when I'm not, I'm always reading Lucid, and of course, all the rest of the plugs, including Ruth's most recent book, Strongman, in the show notes. Thank you so much for talking to me, as always. I really appreciate it. I learned so much from our chats and from reading everything you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, there she goes, Ruth Ben Giat, Dr. Ruth Ben Giat, professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. as well. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. Go subscribe to Lucid, which is her publication about abuses of power and how we can counter them. And follow her on Twitter as well. And let her know that you heard her here on the show. Always matters. Makes a big difference. At Ruth Ben Giat, Giat. Check her out. And all of that is in the show notes. I hope to see you tonight at our Hangout, 8 p.m. East. If you're not a subscriber, sign up right now. There's a lot more people that listen to this podcast than pay for a subscription. It's $5 a month at minimum. You can always pay a lot more, and many of you do, and that is amazing to me because I can't do it without you. All right, that's it from me, and let's let our friend John Carroll sing us out every day, as he always does, with You Gotta Stand Up right now. Also available free to buy. Take it away, Johnny.
Him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide.